Heard underneath was tunes entitled Lumumba and Way Home by the Mystic Revelation of Rastafari, Ground Nation, CD. Yes, I. As I said, you are in tune to Potential Vibes, the World Series. I'm Sister Afrikiti, your producer and host, and I'm joined in the studio tonight by a brother who I first met during the Revolution 101 conference, and he just blew me away. Since that time, I've had the fortune of seeing the brother lecture on other occasions, and he still blew me away. I've been working on getting him here since I first met him, and it's my pleasure right now to bring to the Vibes Posse a brother who is an alumni of Benedict College of Columbia, South Carolina, and Clark Atlanta University, Brother Bobby Hemmitt, who is trained in commercial art. He's a researcher in all things ancient and African, mystery systems, metaphysics, esoteric science, and time cycles. Greetings, Brother Bobby, and welcome to the airways of WRFG and Potential Vibes.
Hotep, Sister Afrikiti.
Hotep to you, my brother.
Yeah, and I see you did a good job with the cosmos part, the mythological part of that. That just blew me away, too. You came right prepared, like you said you was.
Well, we try to do that.
Yes.
So we got some questions for you, Brother Bobby, and we want to get right on into it.
You ready?
All right. All right. As I told you earlier when I talked to you this week, I was doing a little research, right? And so from the little research that I have done, and kind of in keeping with our opening rendition of the creation myth, I found out that Atlantis was indeed the first place where humans, or divine sparks, first took on physical bodies. And that everyone has a theory as to whether there really was an Atlantis, was it not in Atlanta, where was it located, you know, was it in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, or was it in the Caribbean, or was it actually in Hemmitt and Lemuria, same thing, you know, one guy said it went from Madagascar to South America and parts of Africa, and, you know, all these different kind of things. So it seems like, you know, it's hard to get a straight up analysis of the situation.
The first thing we must realize is we want to, since this is such a vague subject as far as you don't know where to go with it because we don't have the documents or the archaeological type data, there is such thing as called the Akashic records, which is in the genetic blueprint of the black man and black woman. Maybe in the European as far back as he goes, but we know by us being the first ones here, we possess this genetic blueprint that no one else does. But to get some academics going as far as this Plato's Atlantis, when we say Plato, was the first time we heard this coming out of Hemmitt. Now I want to set the background as far as the documentation that we do have, and that is coming from Hemmitt. And I think we, since it's so vague, we must set this frame of reference first. Now we have Plato, who when he was studying in Hemmitt, supposedly met a person named Solon, be a priest or be a person, that said he had heard the priest talking about a place called Atlantis, a place they call the Pillars of Hercules, a place that sunk below the Atlantic Ocean, so on. And it was very vague. Now, Dr. Ben, our esteemed elder, tells us that since Plato heard this and took it back to Greece, you had about 100,000 books written on Atlantis. And he says, don't pay a mind to a lot of that. Well, you know, people can make up all kinds of things. You don't have that documentation. But it's one thing he did say. He didn't refute that Plato heard it in Egypt or Hemmitt. He didn't say that it didn't exist. He's just saying that a lot of the stuff that we have on it is a lot of fictional things. Well, based on that, we hear Dr. Asa Hilliard and different people talk about continental drift. But they talk about the continent being one mass of land at one time. And by us being the root stock or the primordial people, we say that root stock, the first primordial race. So I'm setting this time frame before we go into space with this.
We're talking like BP, before the present geological dating system, right?
Yes.
All right.
Setting this time frame, since by us being the root stock, we can say that we inhabited that land all over the earth. You know that because when you travel to any place you travel, you take any place, and you will find a group of indigenous Africans there. No place on the continent that you couldn't go that we haven't been. So based on the primal root stock, we're talking about the beginning, the primordial people, that melanated people. We knew that this land was inhabited by black people. Now we talk about Atlantis and Lemuria. Well, first of all, when they say Lemuria, if you hear most of Western scholarship and all, they don't have the greatest respect for Lemuria.
Yeah, you don't find a whole lot about
it. You don't find a whole lot about it, and also what you find is they try to put it into the same primitive state, not primitive primal meaning the positive, but primitive primal as far as the Western concept meaning savage type thing. But we can draw that into one place. We call that Atlantis. You say Atlantis and Lemuria. Well, you had different segments of black beginnings. And when you're talking about this one primordial land, especially Lemuria and Atlantis, what we find is that whether it was all over the place, and we know that this Atlantis, before continental drift, was everywhere. We just call it the land of the blacks. Because if you notice when they talk about other planets, and we don't want to get into the Star Trek type of mind or the Star Wars where you just got all these different types of beings and all, and you don't never see just one whole race of people. But in real cosmic law, based on a good brother in Chicago, his name is Delbert Blair, and we'll be trying to get him down here, as well as our own elder, believe it or not, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, believe it or not, right, tell us that Earth is one of the only planets that has all these different races. Most of them have just one race, maybe two, but one mass race and then probably one smaller race. But as far as Earth, we have all these different races. Now getting back to Atlantis, and there's a reason for that based on the history. Getting back to Atlantis, the best place to trace this is Kemet.
Right, that's what Dr. Massey says.
You got to trace it from Kemet. If you want to set this framework, one reason, I'll tell you why. Number one, the first place that we heard it was Kemet. So therefore, we can't have no other people. And we know that Kemet is black. We don't need to get into that. We got 4 years, 5, 6, 7 years of ASCAC to tell us that. And Dr. Ben and everybody else, even Massey in the 19th century to tell you that.
Yeah, a lot of those, and even a lot of those are 1800 writers, white writers said it
right, exactly,
in their own way.
So we don't need to get into it whether it be in any civilization other than black. So now if this Atlantis is only possessed by Kemet, where they told it to a certain amount of people that got it out, or let's just say one person, then nobody can make no claims on saying it had all these other people. Because I know there's one writer, I can't think of a name at the moment, but she shows Lemuria and she shows this West African type. And she shows Atlantis and she shows a Mongolian type. So they'll show you Mongolia. Yeah. And they'll say that this is the Mongolian type, which is your Asian type today. You will see this, and then they show you the Aryan race and all of this, but Atlantis, they try to keep it into that Asian type frame and things. But we know that if it comes by Kemet, the only person can give claim to this is us. It's our history. Now, based on Kemet, we say that they said to Plato that they had this place and it mysteriously disappeared, or a group of places. It's still vague where we trace this Lemuria thing and where it came from. But anyway, we must go back to the Temple of Dendera in ancient Kemet. And at that Temple of Dendera in ancient Kemet, you'll find there's a zodiac. I always start from this zodiac because for some reason, ever since I've been lecturing, this zodiac has possessed me. Well, number one, the Temple of Dendera was built as late as the Ptolemy period, but it was an ancient temple that was torn down at that site, and they rebuilt it. And they used to tear down temples and rebuild those temples at the same site. Well, there was a blueprint in the wall of that older temple. And in that blueprint was based on how to construct this temple and the certain deities to put on the temple. And we have this zodiac of Dendera that the French took to the Louvre in Paris, blew it down, took to the Louvre in Paris, and then put a plaster cast up in Kemet now. So to see the original one, you'd have to go to the Louvre in Paris. But this is something very interesting about this zodiac. Number one, if you look at it, or the planisphere, as the French call it, at least the ones of Napoleon's time. If you look at it, the deities are not the same as the later pantheon in Kemet, Osiris, Isis, Horus, and all of those. Even though you have Isis the Elder and Horus the Elder, those deities are not the same. It's almost to say that this is something from a primordial past, and we must trace this back. Where you have the great goddess Apit, the hippopotamus goddess that I always pay homage to in my lectures, that I talk about the great first primordial mother. Then you have her son Sut, or Set as you know him today, but he's a good god at first before he falls from glory and becomes the primordial devil and the prototype of the devil that we have today.
Sounds like Uranus in our story.
Right, it's the same story, you see. Just different linguistics telling the same story. But anyway, well, where did it come from? It didn't serve the purpose of all of Kemet for the 3,000 years of dynastic period, if we want to put it, because we are now finding out that the dynastic stuff, Manetho just gave them that just to shut them up. Because one thing even Mame Blavatsky says in a book, Secret Doctrines,
right.
She said that one thing we found out about ancient time cycles is they never really told you the completion of the time cycles and the real lineage of time, because they knew to tell you that if you know something about a person's past, you can dominate the future, which the white boy has been doing to us recently. We don't blame them for that, because the simple fact that coming to find out that all in cosmic law, it all had to be here for a certain reason. We're going to get into that too now. But you had to get into that too now. Now the point is, this Dendera zodiac shows a set of gods. It shows Apit, a Tyre, which is the first primordial mother. You would have a Sut, her son, and you would have Isis the elder, and Horus the elder is different from the regular pantheon that you have in Kemet. Well, it's one other thing too that we find out in Kemet. We have gods popping up like the goddess Sekhmet. Nobody knows her origin. She has no allegiance on the pantheon. You see, she was once married to Ptah, which was one of the first primordial gods of Kemet, but she has no allegiance. What it means is that because she has no consort, even though the consort is Ptah, because they don't know her origin, she's not controlled in a way in the cosmic law as the other ones have relationship to each other. Also, the god Tahuti is another one that pops up in Kemet. Nobody knows where it comes from. They said it's an ancient god. And this is where we get our Hermetic literature, which is another Greek name for Tahuti, or Thoth. We get this type of knowledge, the knowledge that we have on the scene today. We have this knowledge and we get this knowledge, but we don't know where the primordial past is. And this is telling us a story. Now, setting up the framework, we have a direct link into Atlantis. And several books, I think you can get a book by Mary Hope, even though she does a little crazy job. She starts rambling and all. Just go out and tell the truth and quit putting so much stuff in there and tell the truth. But still, yeah, we can read between the lines.
In a lot of stuff.
Yeah, to wrap it up in a lot of stuff. You get to the meat of that. She talks about the lineage of Tahuti coming from Atlantis. For lack of a better word, Atlantis. Because to say Atlantis is to put it in the Atlantic Ocean, and that's not enough. Now you ask this question. You said, well, where was it? Was it in Kemet, or was it all over? Well, based on the studies of Massey and based on my own studies, we find out that if we want to say, just like the United States of America, and we want to say, well, where was the capital of the United States of America? You would say Washington, D.C. Well, now we find out that the headquarters of the actual capital, or the actual center, was right there in the Nile Valley regions. Why is this? Let me explain. Number one, we find out that we have a Sophic cycle. That's every 26,000 years. We have a certain cycle called a great year. But we have smaller cycles. We have the Sophic cycle as far as the 1 year cycle is every July the 23rd. Or some people say 25th. Depends on what month we in, because all that's messed up. But you have this cycle. Come to find out, Brother Charles Finch, Brother Dr. Charles Finch, did a book called Echoes of the Dark Land, Themes from an African Eden.
Yeah, I'm reading that.
And he's tracing the Sophic cycle from the works of Gerald Massey, as well as a couple of other people. I think the guy's name, Locklaw. The name of the book is The Dawn of Astronomy. Anyway, and a couple of other people. He's tracing this Sophic cycle. And by reading that, you would say, well, this Sophic cycle, the 26,000 year, this great year period, if it started in Hemmitt, even if it started 3,000 years ago, if it started 10,000 years ago, 26,000 years, it would be a long time before we get to this great year period. But the sad mistake of this, if you just stop it at Hemmitt, is Hemmitt was not the author of that cycle, of that esoteric time cycle. It was a primordial people at a later date, and that primordial people were the people of Atlantis and Lemuria. Then if you talk about the 26,000 year cycle, then we could say that we are coming up on that in the year 2000, you see. Then, but still yet, that makes it back to Hemmitt again. Because the Sophic cycle in the primordial star of all time is no better personified than in Hemmitt. You see, even the Nile River itself is called Sophis, the Nile. Also, we understand that every year you have the heliacal rising of Sophis, or Sirius, if you want to get to later names of the star. Set is the primordial name, Set.
Set, right. Who they call Isis.
Yeah. If you want to get to the heliacal rising every summer solstice month, the beginning of the year, the original year, well, black people, we're going to have to start celebrating to stay on time of this thing. Now, if you say you want to get to the heliacal rising of Sirius, it would rise the Nile each year, and they could plant and fertilize. When it was down, they built temples and all. And this is the primordial river that gives us civilization on this earth as we know it today. So what does that mean? That means if the cycle is known in Sirius, where you, in Hemmitt, where you get most of your knowledge based on Sirius, and later on trace that to the Dogon, who was nothing but a lineage of Hemmitt when it was going down. The Dogon people set up camp in Mali. But if this cycle is, you get most of your knowledge from that in Hemmitt, and we're saying that if you trace that back all the way back to Atlantis, then we're saying if the Nile Valley is a very focal point, then we can say that the Nile Valley was still the center of Atlantis. You understand? So, also, we have the great Egyptian priest Manetho. I just want to wrap this document so we can go to some other things. You have the great Egyptian priest Manetho. And Manetho, when the Greeks rolled in and told him, well, listen, we want you to give us the history of Hemmitt, and he's quoting from a book called Sophis. And in this book, which is mysteriously disappeared, you know, hey, all the other secret societies got everything else all over the world, so I don't necessarily say that it's disappeared. Okay. So, in this book, Sophis, he talks about the works of Tahuti, and he talks about the Syriac land. He said the Syriac land is governed by pyramids, obelisks, and temples. Pyramids, obelisks, and temples.
That's Kemet.
That's Kemet. But the Sirius land supposedly is a primordial land before Sirius, even though Mary Hope and a couple other people said well, it was nothing but Kemet. But it's giving you something about the architecture of this other place, Atlantis. Now take for instance, if you see these books on Atlantis, you see all of this stuff, these cities and all kinds of all these buildings and all this type of stuff look about like New York. Believe me, there's nothing on the earth that looks about like New York, because New York is a contradiction within itself. Number one, especially our society. Why? I'll tell you why. Number one, we built things from spiritual to physical. And in Kemet, if it wasn't spiritual to physical, we didn't have anything to do with it. You see, everything that was laid out in African society, it was spiritual first. Then it went to physical and technological. Whereas now, today, we just build buildings. And it's all cluttered together. Well, we understand because of the lack of land, they had to put all these buildings up close together, and they had to build, they didn't have enough space, so they had to build them up tall. Whereas we had a vast land, a real vast land, because if you take Kemet to get an estimation of how long it was, it would reach from here to D.C., especially when you can fit America into Africa 5 times. So we had a lot of huge land, so we can build temples half a mile long, a mile and a half long and a half a mile wide. You see, we could do that, but it had a spiritual connotation to it. So now, if Kemet is a later representation of a primordial past called Atlantis or Lemuria, then you can just about bet that the architecture that you get in Atlantis is the same stuff that you would have in Kemet. So I'm trying to get you a framework to set up to get you this framework of how this place really looks. Well, what does it look like? Now, does that mean it's lack of architecture because it still looks like something that's 3,000 years old? No, because remember, they had all this. If the Western society can do all they have done with the same laws that we gave them, imagine what we could have done. But us, if it didn't pan out with the divine law, we didn't do it. We can say that Atlantis or Lemuria and even Kemet started doing certain amount of things against structure at the end, which ended up falling. But it's all still a part of time and all still a part of the cycles. So we must still understand that also.
And also, I read in, I don't know if it was Edgar Casey's book on Atlantis. He did a whole book on readings he'd done on people in Atlantis. And he said, I think he said that when Atlantis, he talked about this great deluge, this great flood.
Right.
And that the people, I mean, it wasn't like all of a sudden, boom, one day it was just destroyed. It took several days for this to happen. There were eruptions and all kinds of things.
Right.
So people fled to different places, too.
That's true, too.
And the majority of them ended up in Kemet.
Yes, that's what they want to say, that the people Kemet through they fled to different places. But to me, if Kemet was a place that was a savage land, it was later on people by Kemet, people by Atlanteans, then how did we get the Nile Valley in the same cycle?
Well, he didn't say they were savage. He didn't say anything about it being savage. He was just saying that these black people were controlling the whole world, basically what he said. Mm-hmm. And when this happened, they just went to another town.
You're exactly right, because remember, if it did fall, we'll get into the metaphysical part of that.
If it did
if it did fall, but I think it did. Part of it fell and part of it went to another place. We'll get into that. But if it did fall, they would have had to set up camp someplace else. Right. You know, in this case, I say the capital and the homeland, Africa. Because it's funny, if we did live all over the world, how is it, and if other places didn't have contact with one place, how is it that we have other races or other civilizations that's far behind Kemet? You see, the point I'm trying to make is, yes, there was something that went down that put Earth backwards. Because now we're finding out that the Earth is billions of years old. And I think a lot of us are so mixed up into biblical history to 6,000 years until we can't even fathom anything beyond that. Nothing. You see, it's billions of years old. And we know that civilization is millions of years old. And we understand that each time we went up and then we went down. That's called evolution and then involution. And with involution, you go down to a point. This is where we are now. Well, we've been getting ready to come out of that.
Well, yeah,
this is what happened with black.
Very much so.
Right. but the involution is this. A person is so high in civilization, and then all of a sudden they can be taken down so low to the most degrading depths until they don't even look like the people that they were once over. Until the people that they were once over seem more humane than they do. And that is in cosmic law. The old Egyptian thing that says Set Typhon must rule completely before Ma'at is established. Before Ma'at is established. And so, in that...
So what does that mean for those people who don't know what Ma'at is?
Ma'at is balance, righteousness, truth, reciprocity, divine law, and order. But you must have a chaotic form that has to rule completely. Now, I want to get into a certain amount of things. Number one, first of all, to give you a little more on the land, we still haven't traced those big heads from Easter Island. Nobody know where they came from. And most people, even most scholars, especially the esoteric scholars, agree that this is some stuff that was left over by Atlantis. You know, one thing I want to say about esoteric history, every time the scientific history try to prove things wrong, the occult sciences and the esoteric history always win over the scientific history.
They're just coming up to say some of the things that they've been saying esoteric and metaphysically for eons.
For eons and stuff. Just like the whole UFO, from the energy, the diet, everything. They've had this stuff since the 1940s, at least the European, after they got the stuff out of Hemmitt with Napoleon in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And then this whole Egyptology craze came in the middle of the 19th century with the translation of the Rosetta Stone. And then it's funny, by the turn of the century, you have a place that looked like out west, just a little, probably a little more sophisticated in New York, a place that looked so-so. And then all of a sudden, by the 1940s, you got skyscrapers thrown up all over the place. This technology out of this world.
Right after the Rosetta Stones were?
Well, after all of the Egyptology and all of the societies who culminated all of the stuff out of Hemmitt and out of India and all of the esoteric sciences and put them together like Maine Blavatsky Society, the Theosophical Society. You have the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn that Aleister Crowley was a part of, and all of these places.
Knights Templar and all
Knights Templar, where you would have the regular Masons, then you would have the graduate lodges, the Hermetic Brotherhood of Luxor, or you would say the OTO, which is Aleister Crowley's group, which is basically a sex tantra group, well, a heavy emphasis on that, and the AA, different groups and stuff of these New World Order groups, as we say, the Old World Order groups, and all, because it's all culminated under one people, the Illuminati, and all. But anyway, based on these structures and based on the different, you have that Easter Island head, and we know that these are some remnants of the old Atlantis. Now, I want to get into certain type of the people. In Atlantis, or Hemmitt, I want to make this point clear. Well, what did the people look like? Well, we know they were black people. Well, we know that the Egyptian past goes all the way back to the Twa people, the Pygmy, or the Twa people. Okay. You know them as the Pygmy today. Right. And we have the god Ptah. So it's telling us some things about a people of a primordial past, and it's interesting. You can get a book. You're going to have to get John G. Jackson's book.
God, Man, and Civilization?
Not God, Man, and Civilization, Christianity Before Christ. There's a section in there on the Twa by a guy, and I forgot his name. You're going to have to get his book for the footnote to get the bibliography. This guy wrote a book in the 1970s called Pygmy Kitaboo. And we also know of Albert Churchward's book, Signs and Symbols of Primordial Man, and Evolution Origins of Freemasonry and Evolution Origins of Religion, because he's a student of Massey. You know, not as good as Massey, but a great student of Massey to give you all this stuff on the Twa people as related to Masonry and signs and symbols and esoteric science. But also you have this boy, I can't think of his name at the moment, that wrote a book called Pygmy Kittaboo, Get John G. Jackson's book, Christianity Before Christ. And in this book, the 12 people told him this. Because this European went down and studied with him for a certain amount of time, and the 12 people told him, the 12 priests told him that we had a civilization like Hemmitt, but we tore it down because it got out of hand, and then we tore it down and we returned underground. Now when we say underground, we're not talking about like a underground, like a synonymous group of people that you don't know about. We're talking about literally underground. Very key, because we might have an Atlantis, well, we know we got an Atlantis that exists today physically, and one that exists today spiritually or astrally. As above, so below, you know. And he said that we turned underground. Also, we have remnants of the 12 people in a way, because, well, based on this guy that wrote the book, in a way having something to do with that genetic pattern of other races. Other races.
You talked about that in Revolution 101.
Revolution 101, right. Yeah. Also now, we laugh at the little man called Honorable Elijah Muhammad. He says he's this big racist. Now check this out. Now this is funny. I want all the white people to hear this too, because the people who backed him up was not black people, because black people didn't buy it at all. Just a few people bought it, mainly the people that was in the nation, and you know, the individuals, but most of the people didn't buy it at all. He said that the mad scientist called Yakub created the European race. You know, created the European race. Now this is a story, if it's a shock to you, most people know about this by now. If not that, by the Malcolm movie, they went and did some research and know about this. So he said he created the European race on the island of Patmos and all. Now, it's funny because if you get the book Rudolf Steiner, who was a master theosophist, who was a part of the Theosophical Society, have a book called Atlantis and Lemuria. And in the book, he talks about Manu, one of the same ancient scientists that Honorable Elijah Muhammad talked about, creating a new race of people. You see. Now this is the European talking. He selected a germ from the old race and he created a new race of people. His name is Manu. Also, you have references to that by C.W. Ledbetter and Annie Besant called Man, Whence, How, and Whither. And this Manu. Also, in all of the Theosophical Society, when they talk about Atlantis, they always talk about that this great Aryan race was created in Atlantis. Now, they're talking about their own stuff, saying about this Aryan race created in Atlantis. Also, they talk about, well, if this great Aryan race is created in Atlantis, we know now, we must study some other things to find out that maybe the 6,000 years, the European was around a little bit longer than 6,000 years. Even though say well, the European can't trace his history back to 6,000 years. But if he's created in Atlantis, then we got a little bit of problem here. Well, to document that, we have the story of Osiris in the Book of the Dead saying that he did like other people. He traveled the world and he was trying to teach barbarians. You know, barbarians. Not saying that the European society is the only society that was barbaric, but let's put it this way. If we were black people on the continent of Africa and the continent of Atlantis and had all this high civilization in society, be that as it may, he ain't talking about us being no doggone barbarians. You know, and this is right in the Book of the Dead. And also, another white scholar, Graham Hancock, wrote a new book called Signed and Sealed, talking about the Ark of the Covenant. Now on this, just like Annie Besant, C.W. Ledbetter, Mame Blavatsky, Rudolf Steiner, as well as the Rosicrucian Cosmos Conception, one of the authors, profound authors that wrote that book, talk about the same thing. Now this is the esoteric science we're dealing with here. And they talk about this group being created in Atlantis. Now, so much for these different races. We'll get back to that in a minute, but I want to move on. Well, what type of climate was Atlantis? What was it? Spiritually, I'm talking about. Well, you said something early about man being in the cosmological or the astral region or the spiritual, and then being cut off from the spiritual into the matter or the physical region. Well, supposedly in Atlantis, we have just that at first. We have a spiritual region, and then all of a sudden man got trapped in the physical region. The spiritual would be the beginning of the fourth dimension, and the physical would be the the ending of the third dimension, or the let's say the beginning of the third dimension going on down. And this third dimension is a third dimension. What it is, it's a third dimensional climate, more of matter. So
we have here.
Right, exactly. So all of a sudden, they got trapped somehow in the third dimension. And part of them got trapped in the fourth dimension. Well, that's not being trapped. Part of them was left in the fourth dimension. Now, it's interesting about this because we're trying to find a spiritual concept. That spiritual concept is this. If you go to Hemmitt and you go into the mystery school, or we can take the Yoruba religion. When the European went into Africa, and he went into Nigeria, different places, he said, well, these Africans have all these rituals that can do miraculous jobs. And we know these rituals have a greater meaning than just the regular ritual or the stuff that they put into the ritual. But it's almost like the scientific part is removed from it. Well, come to find out, even Ivan Van Sertima talks about this and other African scholars, that when the outside conquest came into Africa, the scientists or the priests or the great teachers went underground because they would rather give you some of the knowledge that you had already learned in the Greeks, in Greece, from Greece going into the mystery schools, than to give you all of the knowledge. Because based on, look what has been done with just some of the knowledge. What about if they had 360 degrees? Then the New World Order would have it point blank. I mean, nothing we could do about it. You know, because they would be at one.
They saved that for the Africa War.
Right. So they went, yeah, right. They went underground. Well, that could be synonymous groups, or that could literally mean underground too. We're going to get to that in a minute. But they said they had these magnificent rituals. And in these rituals, they said it was almost as if the sciences were gone. But then if we trace that back to Hemmitt, where we had science and ritual, you'd find out that the scientific part was this. We just said that Atlantis got trapped in the third dimension and the fourth dimension. The fourth dimension being the highest realm, which is a spiritual realm. Well, when you're dealing with these rituals, you are actually, in a way, dealing with your ancestors, living ancestors, cosmic beings that don't need this astral body. You're dealing with them, and they are actually doing operations on you, literal operations on you, with your with contact with your spiritual body. You understand how that goes now?
Right.
So when you go into the mystery schools and you see different communication with the gods, they were actually talking about entities on other planes and getting in contact with those entities on other planes, and they were actually doing work that you couldn't do in a physical realm. Because remember, let's say, take for instance, operation. That's the lowest form of healing out there. That's the last resort.
Physical surgery.
Physical surgery. And basically they did that, okay, they dealt with fractures that way and different things that had to be done, because we also know that in Switzerland they found a mummy, supposedly in Switzerland, with an artificial heart. That's interesting. And Delbert Blair talks about it, Brother Delbert Blair talks about it out of Chicago, as well as Tony Broder talks about it in Washington, D.C. Very interesting. But look, they dealt with these people, they dealt with both levels, and it was almost like saying They were dealing with the ancestors that they got cut off from. Same thing that you introduced in the story. You understand? So now we understand how these rituals work, you see, and different things.
And the one thing that Shechem brings out in the Meduna is that the main part of the formula that they didn't give them were the words of power.
Right.
That's the whole key.
That's the whole key.
Yeah.
There's a story. We're gonna continue this, but I want to say this is a story about Aleister Crowley. Aleister Crowley, in the OTO, when he talked about this book of law that was given to him by a priest of Set Typhon, when he meditated and came in contact with this entity, it said it was one word that would get you over into the other realm. And he died, and his son, one of his spiritual sons that tried, that got a little further than him, both died like years apart, never really getting that key. You see, those words of power that would make you one with the universe.
Well, that's a good point, Brother Bob. It's the midnight hour, you know, and we're going to take a quick break, let you catch your breath, and we're going to come back and tie this all up, try to wrap it up as we go forward into the African Genesis. You're in tune to WRFG Atlanta. I'm Sister Afrikiti, producer and host of Potential Vibes, and we're joined by Brother Bobby Hemmitt, researcher, lecturer on African metaphysics, esoteric sciences, and cycles. Brother Bobby.
Yes.
When we left off, you were giving us a little knowledge about the people of Atlantis. You told us, basically, we think that when we talk about Atlantis, we're actually talking about ancient Kemet. So how does, excuse me?
Yeah, in so many words, yes. I want to clarify that also. Before I go into, I want to hold a point because I was talking about the spiritual concept as far as the different planes and the regions of the cosmos.
Okay.
I'll get back to that, but to give you a further insight on a connection with Kemet, is we have the Great Sphinx in Kemet, and Sphinx is Greek for a female gender, number one. Also, Sphinx is none other than the goddess Sekhmet. More than we think of other, it's the goddess Sekhmet when you really look at it, because it's a lion. But Sphinx is Greek for a female gender. Now, we also said that the goddess Sekhmet was an untraceable god. And we also know that the Sphinx is untraceable. They had carbon dating done a few years back, and they found out that the Sphinx had a heavy rainfall content. So the last time that it rained that much in Kemet at that part, because there are some parts of Kemet that doesn't rain at all, ever. The Nile was the primary source of water anyway. But the last time they had that type of rainfall to make an impression on the Sphinx based on carbon dating was 9,000 years ago. Then they carbon dated that rainfall and found out that it was 17,000 years, and they did it again and they said, hey, we don't know when it was built. And this is giving you some magnitude of what this goddess Sekhmet was all about as far as the lineage of ancient Atlantis. So if that is up in the upper Kemet, or let's say up in Kemet, and it's you can't tell what time it is, and that's going to tell you, and that's high technology. The Sphinx is high technology. And that's telling you that Kemet was there longer than any 3,000 years and was there longer than any minis. Because there's even reports in the book, I think the book is called Stairway to Heaven by Zechariah Sitchin, where Alan H. Gardner, one of the greatest Egyptologists as far as a hieroglyphic expert, a lot of people depended on Gardner to translate a lot of things because he was just that good. He translated the Hieratic Papyrus of the British Museum, Chester Beatty. Gardner did some work and said that Khufu is a good evidence that Khufu forged his name on those pyramids, that they were a lot older than he said he built. And Khufu forged his name. We know this happened to be the case because National Geographic did a special a couple of years ago, I think about 10 years ago, where they found out that Ramesses, being a little arrogant at that time, put his name over some Chinooks or cartouches for those who don't know what Shannus are, put his name over the cartouches of King Tut. So they were good for forging their name over different things. And they said that those pyramids, he forged those pyramids, and he's done some work. You can get that work. There's a whole chapter on it called The Forger of the Pyramid in Zechariah Stitchen's book, The Stairway to Heaven. Now, and that means that it was there long before. Even when you can trace Horus, Osiris, and all those back 10,000 years, Masses say trace back 10,000 years, and far way probably before then, because we have the segment, segment, Apit, and you have Tahuti. You don't even know what the lineage of those are.
Lasky says 18,000.
18,000. You see, so we're talking about no birth record. Honorable Elijah Muhammad was right. There's no birth record, but not only the black man who is God, but no birth record for the gods or the spiritual gods in the fourth dimension. Now, we mentioned the fourth dimension, and we mentioned the part when we're dealing with that entity on other planes. And you deal with those entities on other planes by getting in touch with your higher self. Now in Kemet it was called, they had different mysteries in Kemet, but none was greater than the mysteries of Isis, or the mysteries of Aset.
Aset, right.
Which was the highest mysteries. And the mysteries of Aset, the highest of the mysteries of Aset was called the Black Rite. The Black Rite, in the book Robert Temple's The Serious Mystery, the Black Rite, also you get it in Robert and Tom Wilson's book, The Cosmic Trigger. The Black Rite was the highest part of the mystery. And that Black Rite was talking about Sirius, and it's connected with the black dot, melanin, that you get in Richard King's book, African Origins of Biological Psychiatry. And that Black Rite being the end cycle that we have in India called the Kali, or the Kali Yuga, the end cycle, the black cycle, which you have the word Kalas inside of the woman's body. When the light hits it, the sun hits it, she can reproduce a baby without even the male. Because we have the great god Apit, and the great god Apit, she has no consort. That means that she reproduced without a consort, with no males around. So we want to talk about superiority. We always say that the African woman is the superior vessel. We have, as above, so below, you have the microcosm of the macrocosm. Well, the Afro woman is both of that, the micro and the macro.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm glad I'm one.
Yes. All right. What about the people in Atlantis? Well, one thing about the people in Atlantis, they were highly melanated, which means melanin, which means black, which means the black light, the black right, the highest blue black, the highest part of the mysteries. That black is not only black on the outside, but black all the way to the root, the substantia nigra, the black dots, the black substance, that blue black, triple darkness of space, as the Muslims would say.
In the beginning was darkness.
In the beginning was darkness, and then there was light, and light is what comes out of darkness.
Hello.
Now, because of them being highly melanated, and because they were people from the fourth dimension and the third dimension, we find out that all of the third eyes, all of the kundalini of the third eye, the clairvoyant eye, the fire eye, the eye in the back of your head,
The eye and eye, all seeing.
all seeing eye, all of the third eyes were open. So people were clairvoyant. They said that there was a dimness, and the people in the daytime, it was a dimness like a fog. But the third eye was open, and they didn't really need natural eyesight. As the people got more material, the third eye became dim, and the regular sight, the material sight, became more clearer. You understand how that goes? That means there was no such thing as night to these people, because they were dealing with a third eye, or they were dealing with the all-seeing eye.
So they had like ultraviolet light coming out the head, straight up. Natural style all the while.
Yes. So this is a magnitude of what we would say the African genius or the God. And then that third eye made you one with the universe. And that goes into the part of vibration. You see, one thing that most scientists know, or some scientists know, and all occult scientists know, that there's no thing in the universe as called impossibility. No such thing as impossibility. Something that's impossible, it depends on what vibratory rate you own. And we have vibration, and the earth and the universe is made out of vibration. What you have beyond the earth and beyond other planes is a higher vibratory rate. Things are vibrating at a higher vibratory rate. When you come to earth that you talked about at the beginning of the, and you become to other planets where you talked about the beginning of the speech, where you talked about that matter.
Right, gross matter.
The gross matter means you have a lower vibratory rate.
Really?
And based on how lower the vibratory rate is, both mental and physical, the less you can do things. But the more and the higher the vibratory rate is, the more you can do things. And that's taking us right into today. Now, before I get to that point, I want to go into this. In Peter Tompkins' book, Mysteries of the Mexican Pyramids, talks about a group of blue men. When they say blue men, they mean blue-black. Blue-black men that were seen all over the earth, everywhere. Reports of this blue-black man all over the earth from Sirius. You see, the Dogon mythology tell you that our ancestors are from Sirius, as well as the ancient Hemmitt mythology tell you that when we die, the end result is we will go to Sirius, based on our karmic lessons being in order. We will go to Sirius, which is the sun behind the sun, which is the primordial star of all time, which we call Sophic, to give you the Sophic cycle. Well, there's a Sirius or Sophic solar system with other planets.
Right, those are the other spheres that they talked about. It was
Right.
14 in all.
Right, with other planets. And on those planets and those other spheres, this is our end result of where we supposed to have gone.
Right, right.
So there was a direct relationship between Atlantis and the star Sirius. And this is why we call Atlantis the Syric land, as well as Kemet the Syric land. This is the end result, I know, for black people. I don't know about other people, but I'm talking about my history. We're quoting our history. Our end result was to rise to Sirius. There's parallel universes, and man goes on and on and on. But the end result from this relationship to this earth was Sirius or Sophis or Sept, as we call it in different names. But anyway, these blue men, the blue-black men, were seen from Sirius all over. That means that Atlantis had space travel. Why not? We got space travel today. The Europeans had space travel since the 1940s. They're saying that some of the crashes you saw were not crashes of ours, the black people's, but crashes of the Europeans that they covered up. Above top secret government cover-up. Roswell, New Mexico, crash at Aztec. You know the history of it. We're going to get into that in later segments. Right. Whole UFO phenomenon. But anyway, these blue men were inhabited all over the earth. Now, it's interesting because in the Muslim, well, let's put it this way, the nation of Islam, not all Muslim, not the Orthodox, but the African American Muslim, or to give you a region, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, he has a son by the name of Rasul Muhammad, which is the youngest son from Sister Tainetta Muhammad. And he said he remembered as a young boy sitting around the table with his father, and he saw some blue-black men. Now listen to this. He saw some blue-black men, so blue-black, if they closed their teeth and their eyes, you'd disappear. And they were sitting around the table. And he said that these are the scientists from the wheel. Wheel meaning Ezekiel's wheel. The wheel, many wheels, the mothership. Well, we're getting a little hot, bringing this thing home today. Same type of men that we get in the same story of the blue men, the blue-black men from Sirius. It's interesting about these blue-black men from Sirius. They said that these blue-black men from Sirius, at the time when Atlantis was supposedly sinking, One sinking from the fourth dimension into the third dimension, and also sinking to another level of the earth, which still exists today. We're taking it on home. It said that these people, when they were sinking, they were around, these blue men were around to record the secret of Atlantis sinking. And they put their findings in a cave or some caves in South America. Now, going back to that, we have the place that I was trying to get to is under the earth. The realm of Atlantis is under the earth. You see, if you go to the South Pole, there's a book you can get called Subterranean Worlds. Walter, that's Captain Minko. Subterranean Worlds, where if you go to the North Pole, if you go further enough, you'll find out that there's a hollow earth at the North and South Pole with another atmosphere. And we got brothers and sisters that live up under the earth right now.
Now, that's strange that you should mention that, Brother Bobby, because Helen H.P. Blasky, in her book, she talks about the imperishable sacred land.
Yeah.
She said there were 5 continents, and she named them. And the first one she calls the imperishable sacred land. And she doesn't give a positive geographical location, but she gave the following poetic description. The pole star has its watchful eye upon it from the dawn to the close of the twilight, a day of the great breath.
Yeah. And this is where, and this subterranean world is dealing with a lot of Blavatsky's work. Now, to bring this on home, you have
quickly, KT.
You have okay, right. You have this people that live up under the earth. They're called the blue race. Get the book, Subterranean World. It's called a race of blue men. Blue meaning blue-black. And these blue men are the inhabitants of the ancient Atlantis that sunk below the earth that exists today with another atmosphere that has motherships and science technology, UFOs, whatever you want to have it. We're rushing this thing. Yeah. And they have this... and they have these blue men. Now check it out. They have pyramids down there from the old Atlantis, and they register these pyramids. These people are scientists that can control the weather and control the earth, and they are responsible for keeping the earth rotating at a certain existence. But these people are going to return. We'll get into this later on, but they're going to return and take back their planet, because we have the people from Hemmitt. We have the Africans that went underground. Remember I talked about the Pygmies or the Twa that went underground. We have the people from Hemmitt, and we have all of the gods that you've been talking about from the last 3,000 years. We got this stuff right on our earth, as well as the heavenly realm, because we got the brothers from Sirius backing us up with this too. But the end result of this is they're going to come and they're going to take back their planet. And they pay from the powers to be. Because remember, Honorable Elijah Muhammad said that our mothership is not coming from space. And he talked about these blue men that were sitting around the table. They come from the beginning on the inside of the earth. You see.
And all these volcanic eruptions,
right.
Now,
and they're going to take back...
Well, KT gave you 10 more minutes.
Okay, cool.
Slow down.
Okay, right. All right. They're going to take back their planet. Now, it's funny, there was one white boy, get the book Subterranean Worlds, that went in down, because there's some places that there's passages that you can go to get to the core of this earth, of this great land. One is Tibet, one is Mount Kilimanjaro, around the region that the 12 people said that we had to tear down this civilization and return under earth. One is some African deserts, certain African deserts, and one is the northern South Pole, and one is right here in America called Kentucky. And it was a white boy that went down in Kentucky in the first part of the century and visited these blue people. And they gave him this history. And they told him, listen, you take this, they told him, we want you to tell the world at a certain time and date, but we want you to keep secret at this time. So by the time he came up, they gave him a trap. They trapped half of his torso into the earth when he was coming back up. And the next thing you know, all the rescue team came, you know how when people get caved in, and they were digging him out. And the trap was he was supposed to keep his mouth shut. But he got so, the anxiety, it hit him so much, and he wasn't the right person for the job, so he started telling while he was in the hole, man, there's a blue race of people I met down there, and these people, they told me some stuff that's going to shake this world. And at that moment, by them being masters of science and the weather and the earth, they closed the hole in and killed him. Closed it because it wasn't time for him to tell. But anyway, these blue race of men are coming back to take care of their earth, as well as we have people, our brothers and sisters on Mars, that live up under the planet also. And NASA and Russia in 1962 took a trip. Mars. Yes, that's right. But they took a doggone trip to Mars with an unmanned ship and went to Mars, and something started moving under the earth when they landed. Number one, what is NASA and Russia doing together in 1962? They're letting you know that they never were enemies.
Well, we know it's two sides of the same.
Right, exactly. But they took an unmanned ship. You can get Alternative 3, Bill Cooper's film that showed the life on Mars, as well as a guy by the name of Richard Hoagland, his book Life on Mars, Monuments on Mars, A City on the Edge Forever. You can get, there's videos out and also his book. But anyway, going back to these people under the earth, as well as this whole thing, is Atlantis is going to rise. We are going into the fourth dimension. Now this is very important. We're going into the fourth dimension. And the fourth dimension is a higher vibratory rate. And as we go into it, all black people's pineal glands or kundalini is going to open up. So don't worry about the ignorant people. They're going to know the truth soon anyway, because it's coded right in there. And as we go into that higher vibratory rate, the earth is going to, the pineal glands are going to open up. And when that opens up, we're going to go into the fourth dimension. And on the fourth dimension, all hell going to break loose, because that's the spiritual realm. And the physical has got to leave. And the material has to leave.
It can't enter.
So the New World Order and the new eon and the new millennia is talking about a new dimension. And we are fourth dimensional people. God knows we some spiritual people. And whoa, you can go right on to the Baptist church and you know this. So don't worry about it. And when those pineal glands open up, the wheels are on the pineal glands. The fire in the sky. The fire in the chakras, the fire in the kundalini, but the fire in the sky being the motherships, the wheels, the UFOs.
So, Brother Bob, is that why they never have any reports of the UFOs dealing with black folks?
You know, I went to a UFO conference and they
had two.
And they had they asked all the white people, how many of you seen UFOs? And most of them say we've seen them. And they asked only 3 people didn't raise their hand, and all 3 of those people were black, and they were with me. And all. So there is a connection. But remember, if people got questions, I want you to do your research, because if you do your research, you'll find out that most of your mythology dealing with UFOs, or we say IFOs, identified flying objects, you will find out that that's indigenous people. The Hopi Indians, the Africans, the Tibetans, and all of the other indigenous people around the earth. So what does that tell you? That means that it's on their side. And the little people that you took for granted, that little snotty-nosed boy in the ghetto with them gold teeth in his mouth, and that sister over there in the projects with that blonde hair that you took for granted is actually the God of the universe, and she got back up. So it don't make a difference. So what the New World Order got? Back up. She got back up. She backed up by the wheel. So it don't make no difference what the people got. Army, tanks, and all this. Little UFO project they've been doing for the last couple of months. We're going to get into this the next segment. Don't make no difference. We got 50,000 years advancement. So if I'm 50,000 years more advanced than you, it don't make no difference what kind of firepower you got. You finished. You see. It's over with. And we can say today that the slave can actually say, hey, some people got something to worry about, and it ain't us. What we got to worry about is right here on earth. It's in Washington, D.C., and it's right in our towns. And there's a void between the time that the wheels come back and right now. And that void is, hey, they got to wipe us out too. So Armageddon is here, you see. But we are spiritual people, and I'll end on this. Spiritual people that have believed in God, and I don't care how much that person is a dope dealer, how much that person is a gangbanger, how much that person is a drunk, crack addict, or whatever you want to call it. It's funny. You ain't never heard of no black person worshiping no Satanism. You put a gun to their head, they ain't going to worship no Satanism. We are the people of God because we are God. Now, that means that it's all on our side. So brothers and sisters, Armageddon is here. But the point is, the people, our brothers and sisters, is in the comfort zone, and we can say it's about white people, because this New World Order don't love you either. They say they're going to take 36 million people out of America. They're going to wipe America, they're going to wipe America down to 36 million people. Well, hell, we only about 30 to 40,000 of what the government can count. So that means, yeah, they got us in the, they want to wipe us out with the genocidal plan, but that means there's a lot of white people going to get killed behind this too, because this New World Order is not bullshitting. So you don't have to worry about a little nigger boy in a news station talking no junk. You got your own problem with your own people. You see.
So for that caller that wanted to know if all white people were evil, who was a European, by the way?
All right. So they got their own problems to worry about. So this, don't worry about the racism as far as, hey, it's the black man against you. Look, you got your own problem, and it's your own government. And your immunization and all of your stuff that they're getting ready to put on you with the debit card, you got a lot to worry about.
Check this malaria thing that's popping up in all these little small counties.
That's true.
That's meningitis.
That's true. Meningitis.
Right. Thank you, brother.
There's got to be some government, because look,
and this
you right here in the land of the CDC, and you tell me you can't wipe it out the first time? Huh?
Yeah.
They controlling the disease.
Exactly.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
And they recently, somebody told them recently, well, you better add prevention to your name, don't you think? So
Right.
now there's a communicable disease
All right.
and control and prevention center or something like
Yeah,
that.
now one word of caution before I get out of here, and this is very serious. Number one, in the New World Order, believe me, you're going to have to become total vegetarian. Because the meat is finished. The beef is finished. The chicken is finished. You got to become total vegetarian.
I get it.
Steroids, you got to do it. Because even Farrakhan said, if you in it for taste, you're a dead person. You got to become total vegetarian. Diet is the key.
So that's the key to getting your body ready for that pineal gland.
Right, that's the key. And also, too, studying is the key, because studying elevates higher vibratory rate.
This is true.
You see, if the more mental you are, the more things open up in you. And also, more mental you are prepared for the New World Order. But spiritually, more things open up, and more you can combat these diseases and all this stuff by mental. Because we know a lot of the stuff is mental, too. So we got to study. We got to study. And if I didn't spread enough bibliography tonight, please get back with me on the next segment, and we'll do that, because we got 2 weeks of this stuff. Hotep brothers and sisters,